Aim to Sustain is a partnership of 9 of the key organisations that have an interest in game shooting. The idea essentially is to build on what used to be the Shoot Liaison Committee, so that in the first instance they work as far as is possible in a concerted way to defend shooting, and as far as is possible don't trip over one another or fall out.
Why do we need an Aim to Sustain when we already have a BASC and we already have a CLA and we already have the constituent members?
Because partnerships generally, if they work, are more effective than people acting severally in different directions. But it's got the advantage that you have a thing, which is a partnership, but it still allows the several organisations to have their own voice and to, if necessary, attack a particular issue in their own way. So the CLA or the Scottish Landed Estates will have a different view of the world and a different approach to an issue than, say, BASC or the Countryside Alliance or whatever.
And we are under pressure like never before. We are under pressure far more than we were last year. So Aim to Sustain in that respect, in and of itself, has not had that much of an effect. Or would we be under more pressure if it didn't exist?
In the first place, there is no doubt, because I've lived it, that shooting is under more pressure. The big changes in that, I think, are essentially that hunting was banned. Hunting was the invisible screen that meant that politicians didn't have any interest in shooting, because whenever they wanted to attack hunting, they would say to shooting people, so of course you're safe with us. I never believed it, and now, as time passes, that's coming to fruition. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that I think that you've got, with social media developing and information flowing faster and the ability to manipulate things in what is essentially a post-truth age, that it doesn't have to actually be real. You can accuse a shooter or an individual or whatever of some heinous act, and it doesn't matter whether it happened or not. By the time it's out there, it's a fact.
Well, even the accusation itself could, for example, in Scotland, lead to the loss of the incoming grouse moor licence, and if Labour gets in, the same kind of thing for England. Is that right?
That's right. Well, as I said when hunting went, that shooting would not go the same way. It would be approached in penny packets, bit at a time, and that's what's happening. I think the shooting world needs to be as resilient and as powerful as it possibly can be. First step is to get us all singing off the same hymn sheet, which I think Aim to Sustain is now doing really quite effectively. So the response to the GL 43 thing was one of the best responses that the organisations have collectively made, in my view. And that was robust, and BASC had taken forward the judicial review, and that will be supported in various ways by the partners and so on. The other issues that I think in this audience, in this context, are worth thinking about are that all the organisations and Aim to Sustain are only as good as their resource base, and if you look at that, that's terrifying. So in spite of the fact that some very rich people shoot, and in spite of the fact that a lot of people spend a lot of money on shooting, not everybody's rich, but most of them it's a way of life, it's something you don't want to lose. The enemy, if I can characterise them as that, the people that want to do us harm, are immensely resourced. So the RSPB, who you talked about earlier, and we all love, and if you want to read about them, then in my book over there, More Than Matters, is available today. That they spend £30 million a year on inspiration. Don't be surprised if that inspiration includes stabbing me in the back or you in the back. It is not about simply inspiring people to like birds. It's about manipulating policy and manipulating public opinion. We haven't got those resources to use. What we have got, and I think we underutilise, quite frankly, is you and the other people that are walking about out there. There is a view when you come to defending something like shooting, to think of it as something that organisations can do. Well, they can and they should, and they're paid to do it. But they are as nothing compared to the power of the people that do it. So what drives me mad is when people say, oh, BASC should do this, or why didn't Countryside Alliance do that? Well, if you thought it was a good idea, why didn't you do it? I'm just a person. We're all people. Chris Packham is a person. He just decided to be a pain in the backside. So why don't you become pains in the backside? But if you've got an idea or a question to ask or something to get across, get it across. Don't wait for the organisations to do it. And what we should do, and that book I wrote was part of it, is we should ensure that all the people that want to have got all the arguments and got the confidence to deploy those arguments and then let them loose, you know?
I have to say the book is absolutely excellent. It's one of the best books I've read on our subject, and I'm glad to say it's available just over there on the table. And if you'd like to,
I was going to mention that. Did I not mention that?
We'll gladly send it to you, but we'll do that afterwards. On the RSPB, it's all very well asking people to represent our views to them, but they have gone down a process that I think it's a kind of redesign of democracy. This thing called the People's Plan for Nature. Have you had a look at that? And can you just explain to the audience what it is and what it means?
Well, I should first of all explain that I'm a prejudiced man. I've got to be frank. If I see anything with people's written in front of it, my trigger finger starts to itch. It's just, I don't believe it, right? And
speaking as a former public servant, this is, of course.
Yeah, I've seen them, hundreds of them. People's whatever. I'm a people. You know, it doesn't represent me. So if you look at that, it's a very interesting document, and it's a very interesting. But the process is the key to it. So it's decided by whoever, but it includes the National Trust and the RSPB. That it would be a good idea to produce the People's Plan for Nature. And so they set about it, and they write to 30,000. Well, first of all, they do an opinion survey and some polling, which gets you stuff, and then they write to 30,000 people, asking them to volunteer to attend 4 sessions, in which they will discuss things and come up with conclusions. Out of that 30,000 people, they get 117, I think it was, 117 people that say yes, they'll come along, right? So we've gone from 70 million to 30,000 to 117. So it's a different thing. You then add to the 117 40 people who are helping and 17 advisors. And then they have these deliberations, and then they come out with stuff. And that's, I won't bore you with the stuff, but it's what you'd expect. It's give the NGOs more money to save birds. Be nice to people. Be fair. I used to work in local government, and every local authority has a strategic plan. Somewhere in Whitehall, there's an enormous room which is full of strategic plans which say that we should be nice to people, everybody should be fair, it should be better, everybody should have a job. Then they are borderline meaningless. Is it a problem? Well, there's two things I would say to you. First of all, I don't think it's a bad idea to do those, and we should have our own. One of the things we don't do, and we're going to do, I think, over time, is to start dealing with what is broadly public opinion. So that if you ask people, if you get a cross-section of humanity, the indications is that 30% think shooting's all right, 30% don't like shooting, and 40% don't give a damn either way. So our task is to make our 30% bigger, their 30% smaller, and shrink the bit in the middle. That's our task. And we should all set our minds to doing that. But at the moment, people assume that the 30% for shooting are as opposed to 70% against it. Well, they're not. The 40% that don't care are on our side, not on their side. If somebody doesn't bother whether I shoot or not, they're not against me, they just don't bother. So in fact, we've got 70%. The politicians don't think that. Why don't they think it? Because we haven't got polling data and we haven't got focus group data and all that. We haven't deployed it, so we should. So that's what we've got to do.
You don't sound worried by the People's Plan for Nature. I mean, apart from the extraordinary undemocratic idea of whittling down 30,000 people to 117, paying them £800 and then producing something that is pretty damaging for shooting.
No,
Are you worried?
sorry, that was my second point.
Okay,
the
please.
second point, that in spite of the fact that it's pretty, in my view, bogus, it is actually a present danger. So that it's so sort of stuff that anybody can get anything out of it. So the RSPB or whatever can say, here we are, look, this is part of the People's Plan for Nature. Government, you should do this. So that's why I say we need to get ourselves organised to be able to say to government of whatever stripe, hang on a minute, there's two bits here. The first is there is a large section of the population that don't buy into this. And by the way, this is a bogus way of getting stuff. And secondly, this is prejudicial. A previous speaker was talking about it, but I think it's a thing we miss. And you were talking about Natural England and a deference on. My view is that Natural England, who are a statutory regulator, are institutionally prejudiced against shooting. That's based on practical experience. The RSPB are clearly institutionally prejudiced, but they're an NGO, they can do what they like. A regulator should not be institutionally prejudiced. You wouldn't tolerate it for any other minority. I am a member, and most of the people in this tent are, members of a cultural minority. That cultural minority deserves respect like any other. If we were in Sweden, we wouldn't be having this conversation because the government in Sweden recognises, and if you look at other countries in Europe, in France, hunting as they call it, all forms of hunting, with hounds or with guns, is a recognised as cultural heritage, and is deserving of support and encouragement like any other cultural heritage.
Well, we've decided in the UK that race and religion get protection, but you can be as foul as you like about anybody or any group apart from those. And in that context, you know, we get death threats all the time at FieldsportsChannel. That's normal. We get Chris Packham whipping his supporters against us. That's normal. Surely we just have to accept that.
Well, it's nearly right. I think it's worse than that. That's people that hunt and shoot fish, but certainly people that shoot are in a special category. You don't get any protection. They can say what they like. Now we're fools to put up with it. And to be fair to politicians, and I've worked with them all my life, they are quite shocked when they have explained to them that a gamekeeper's children are being beaten up. I mean, if you look at one of the things the RSPB was going to do in the Peak District, they were going to get £683,000 from the Heritage Lottery Fund to employ people to go around schools and tell the children and then WI and everywhere else that the gamekeepers had annihilated the birds of prey in the Peak District. Well, there's several bits about that. The first thing, they hadn't. The second thing, the birds of prey were increasing in the Peak District. But the third and most important thing is the gamekeepers' children would be sitting in that classroom. Now, can you imagine any other, lorry drivers kill people? Okay, so let's have somebody go around to try and encourage lorry drivers to drive better by telling children at school that lorry drivers kill people. And the lorry driver's little girl is sitting in the audience. You'd think that's wholly unacceptable. Not a problem. Not a problem to the people that want to do it, but not a problem to Heritage Lottery Fund who thought it was a good idea. And not a problem to all the other agencies that had gone in as partners, otherwise it wouldn't get the money. I think it's a disgrace. I don't say that there isn't an issue, but to deal with it that way is disgraceful.
The RSPB, the conservation industry, the whole of them together, they seem to be up to something. They seem to be up to the idea of replacing the British landowner somehow. I mean, one of the things I've heard Mark Avery say is that the landowners have accepted so much, many times more than the value of their land in grants since the Second World War, that technically the taxpayer already owns their land, and it would be a relatively easy step, he didn't say this part, but it would be a relatively easy step for the RSPB to step in and just start managing it. Do you think that is the long-term goal? I mean, is it, or are they simply out to get rid of gamekeepers because they're ideologically driven to do that?
Well, yes, but I think it's worse than that. The first thing is, can I just make clear about the money? Right, so farmers get £3 billion a year. Sounds a lot of money, £3 billion. If you put it in my bank account, it would be, I mean, I've got to say. Birmingham costs £3 billion a year to run. That's what the Inland Revenue, when I worked it for Birmingham, and that's some time ago, the Inland Revenue gave a revenue support grant of £3 billion to Birmingham. It's 1 million people. So don't think £3 billion to keep the British countryside looking how you want it is that much, because it isn't. That's the first thing. Second thing is that I think there is a plot. If you look at United Utilities, what United Utilities have done, I think that the conservation industry is in cahoots with with some of the utility companies and others.
Sorry, we should just say what United Utilities has done, which is to end grouse shooting leases by 2026, which will affect 30 shoots and put those gamekeepers out of jobs. Yeah.
So what's the advantage? Where's the link? So if you take, forget United Utilities, go to Lake Vyrnwy, which I know best. Lake Vyrnwy, the estate belongs to Severn Trent. Severn Trent turns over billions of pounds a year and makes, in an average year, £500 million profit. And they own this thing. It's an SSI, SPA, all sorts of things. They don't want to spend any money on looking after it. Why would they? They're a business, they want to make money. So they get into partnership with the RSPB. And the RSPB then goes and gets funds. It gets funds from the Life Fund, gets funds from the Welsh Government, gets funds from the HLF. The last dose, they got 460,000 quid, something like that, from HLF to do habitat restoration. And if you read the application for the money, it's pretty compelling. Basically, in shorthand, the habitat has deteriorated to a point where it's blowing away, right? So that a lot of the vegetation's gone, there's bare peat. Every time it gets dry, it just blows away. When it gets wet, it runs off, you get peat stain. It's all the usual stuff, right? So they get £500,000 quid. So that's £500,000 that they've got for Severn Trent. Well, why should you pay twice? You're paying you might not, around here you'd be paying twice. If you're paying your water rates or whatever to Severn Trent, you're paying for that. And then as a taxpayer, you're paying money to go back to Severn Trent. Meanwhile, Severn Trent are trousering £500,000 quid. What's the advantage for RSPB? Well, they get more power, they get more influence, they get a chance to get their own grants, which they wouldn't get because they hadn't got the land unless they got it, and they get a chance to make an admin or management fee on it, which is probably about 20 to 30%, which on £500,000 quid is not to be sniffed at. All of that. Now, if you look at, and then you look at all the other ownership, sort of forms of ownership, community ownership, NGO ownership, utility ownership, and this is where United Utilities is relevant. None of them can do the things that are necessary to keep, for example, ground nesting birds in existence. A private landowner can make a decision, sometimes a hard decision. So they're going to employ, for example, gamekeepers who will kill foxes, stoats and crows. They don't have to go to an ethics committee. They don't have to do all this stuff. What they do is they make the decision, they do it. They make a rational decision. Do I need these predators controlled yet? You go then to an RSPB place. They've got an ethics committee that tells them whether they can kill stuff or not. So the ethics committee, I'll tell you what the ethics committee will tell them they can do. They can kill crows in March, April and May. They can kill foxes in the winter. They can use larsen traps to catch the crows. They can't kill magpies. They can't use ladder traps to catch crows, and they can't use snares. So all of that is there. So it's because it's unethical to do those things. It doesn't work. So at the end of the day, these places have become basically graveyards for curlew, lapwing and everything else, whereas a private estate, properly managed, is awash with them.
That is what the RSPB is doing, and it's outlined and those stories again and again in your book over there, which I find horrifying, and of course, the amount of crimes against wildlife the conservation industry is committing is almost entertaining. It's that bad. There are a few things from that I want to pick up. One is, why aren't we, you're here from Aim to Sustain, why aren't we going out for these wonderful grants? We believe in predator control. We have proven examples of where wildlife improves under our management. Why aren't we getting millions of pounds from companies to do this?
That's a very good point, and it's one that I think there's a solution to. The first thing is, if you own an estate, you're not going to get any money really from anybody because it's you. Just like, to be fair, Severn Trent or United Utilities won't get any money directly because they're a business. Actually, United Utilities, unbelievably, bearing in mind that RSPB are their best friends and desperately worried about the environment, in 2021, United Utilities in the northwest spewed raw untreated sewage into the northwest rivers and streams for a total of 746,000 hours in 1 year. That's quite a challenge. You can't really do it. So, is that my phone? Sorry, I was distracted. So what I think we should do, not that I've got an estate, but what I think should happen is you take a leaf out of the thing that GWCT pioneered down in the south, where you get farmer clusters, and so you stop being a farmer or a landowner, you become a group, and you call yourself, let's say in the uplands, you call yourself, I don't know, Wild Swaledale or Wild Teesdale or whatever, and you then start to employ people who can facilitate your access to grants, because believe me, it's not easy. But the NGOs employ. If you look at Moors for the Future, which is a sort of classic, Jeff Eyre in the Peak District, he was here yesterday, perfected a system for revegetating bare peat, right? And he did it. It's not complicated. You spray it with lime, you then spray it with grass seed and heather. The grass seed grows because you've limed it, and so it's now like potting compost. The heather sits there thinking about it, but then it starts to grow a bit, and then the acid takes over again, the grass dies and the heather grows, and you've got yourself a sward again. So he can do that, I think he said, for about £1, I think it's a few pence a square metre. Moors for the Future, who employ 40 people, can do it for £36.50 a square metre. So, but what they can do is that 20 of those people are chasing grants and filling in forms. So we have to be able to, in the first place, get the land together and then get the forms. And finally, we should just say to government, because the great thing about shooting and estate management and landowners and farmers is that they run on outcomes. The NGOs run on process. So they get money to do a process. They will do X, Y, and Z, and if there are no curlews at the end of it, they never said there were going to be any curlews. They just said, give us the money to do the process. Shooting is based on outcomes. If you do the process of releasing pheasants, but there aren't any pheasants, you're going to look a bit of a bloody fool. So you don't do that. So we say to government, if you give us this money, which you can give us half of what you'd have given them, which still shed loads, then we will actually guarantee clean water, clean air, no wildfires, more ground nesting birds, and let us do that for 10 years, and we're away scot.
I worry from a media point of view that we're in a temporary situation with the conservation industry, that right now they're ideologically driven to not shoot foxes, not shoot birds, not shoot predators, not shoot scavengers. And that will change once they realise, for example, as they have, that they can get money for removing the stoats from Orkney. They will say, all right, we'll get rid of the stoats from Orkney. They're getting £4.5 million to remove rats from 3,000 acres of Rathlin Island. That's £1,500 per acre to remove rats. Nice contracts. once they work that out, they're going to put in policies that actually work for curlews and actually work for capercaillie that they've effectively wiped out from Virunwi and Abernethy. When that happens, it's going to be harder to argue against them. Do you think that will happen, or are they absolutely stuck on the ideological stuff?
No, they're incompetent. They just can't do it. The problem is, GWCT research shows very clearly that if you've got a competent gamekeeper, you get all these advantages. So Allerton project at Loddington, Otterburn, and again, everywhere, it works. And then the conservation industry looks at it and says, all right, predator control works there, let's try predator control. You missed the point. It was a gamekeeper. A gamekeeper is not a predator controller. A gamekeeper is the whole thing. A gamekeeper does a lot of other stuff. When the boss comes back from his holidays, he doesn't call the farm manager in because he's not interested in turnips. What he calls in is the head keeper and say, how are the grouse doing? What do you need? What do you need? How do I... So gamekeepers are much more complex creatures than that. The first time I met Big Mark at Gelstad, when he said, he asked me, by the way, if I'd got an estate. And I
This
said,
is Mark
yes,
Avery.
Yeah. Mark Avery asked me if I'd got an estate as we were driving up to Gelstad. I said, yes. He said, where is it? I said, on the drive. And so he said, how would you get hen harriers on Gelstad? And I said, I'd get 2 gamekeepers and say, that's your house, here's your kit, 60, you can have whatever you want, get me hen harriers. And you'd have hen harriers. He said, well, how would that work? I said, I don't bloody know, I'm not a gamekeeper. But he would, And in my experience, there are sort of people that can, you've talked to a good farmer. Good farmer can make sticks grow, You talk to a good gamekeeper, they do it. But it's the whole thing, not predator control.
Ian Coghill, thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, Ian Coghill.